Here is a series I put together on how homes were built in the 1920s. Here is the video that some of you have been waiting for. I believe there was about 50 votes on this. I made a video in the middle of August, on August 15th, and I allowed my viewers to vote for their choice, what type of house they wanted me to draw. And this is the result of it. You did not get to choose. I think I only got 50 votes. I needed 100 to, I was going to take 100. If I had 100 votes, I was going to tally them up and see who won. And wouldn't have been like the presidential election. I would have just simply counted them, and that would have been the end of it. But this is the result of it. I ended up picking one. I just kind of picked one randomly, and I kind of picked one I thought that would be easy to do, and it ended up taking a little more time than I thought. But here it is. This is number 9 from the video. I will put a link here if you want to go check that video out. So here is what I'm going to do in this video. I'm just going to kind of break the house down and provide you with some building plans and some measurements for the windows and doors, wall locations, stuff like that. And then in the next series of videos, I'm going to do what I normally do, start with the foundation and work my way up to the roof framing. And I believe this is about the 5th house I've done like this. Just kind of giving you an idea of how things are built today with the previous ones. And of course with this one, giving you an idea of how things might have been built in the 1920s. I believe the building plan book that I got this particular design from was in 1923. And feel free to criticize my stuff. Don't get carried away, obviously. I have the power to remove the comments, remember, constructive criticism. But if you see something or a method that might have been, you think might have worked better for that period, or something that I might have built better but should have been built a little worse, feel free to share it with us in the comment area. Next up, let's go ahead and take a look at the floor plan that I drew, just to give you an idea for anybody who wanted to check out some of the measurements on something like this. Now, keep in mind that I drew everything to scale in my other model, and I used full dimensional lumber. So all the wall framing studs are 2 inches by 4 inches. The ceiling joists are going to be 6 inches by 2 inches. This computer program was set up to draw it in nominal lumber, which is 1.5 inches by 3.5 inches for the wall framing studs. So the measurements are going to be off a little bit in some places, but you'll still be able to get a general idea. And of course, if you're going to build something like this, keep in mind that I'm not providing anyone with any engineering for this. But if you're going to build something like this, then you're probably going to have to use some larger lumber. You know, for example, instead of 2 by 6 for the floor joist, they might need to be 2 by 8s, or you might need to have some of the floor beams that are going to be supporting the floor joist. They might need to be, instead of having one running down the middle like we do in our plan, you might need to have 2 of them, you know, offset in like 1/3 of the way and another 1/3 of the way, something like that. Just throwing that out there. Like I said, I'm not providing you with engineering on this. So let's go ahead and zoom in. And I'm just going to kind of go around here. Most of the windows are 5 foot. This one here is 3 foot by 5 foot. Almost all of them are going to be 2 foot by 5 foot. Fireplace, porch, living room. Let me go back there. Overall length of the building, bedroom, hallway, closet for the bedroom. I don't know why they put this offset in here, but I put it in. The bathtub really didn't fit. You usually need 29 to 30 inches for a tub. We don't have that here, so this might be in the original design might have meant to have had some type of a clawfoot bathtub, something like that, maybe a smaller sink even. But you can see here where the closets could be a little smaller, but if you encroach in this area here, you're really creating a small space coming in. If I was to design something like this, I'd probably move the bathroom to the front and the closets to the back and get a little more room. I'd lose the window, but the closets would almost double in size, and then I could probably make the bathtub work a little bit better also. Measurements. These measurements, bedroom, and of course this bedroom here, entry to it has another closet, and of course you can always go under the stairs to make the closet a little larger also. In there, coming in, hopefully you can see these measurements. Now let's take a different view here, the inside, and of course this isn't exactly how it would look, but you can see, give you a better idea of how the doors, dining room, bedroom, offset for the fireplace, front door. Front door had a couple small windows next to it, larger windows, living room. We got the double windows there. In the bedrooms here, we got a couple of corners, windows next to the corners. Bathroom, closets. Next, bedroom. And then of course the closet underneath the stairs, or going next to the stairs. And kind of this is what I was talking about. You could have kind of punched a hole through the wall here. And even just put a small 2-foot by 2-foot opening if you're looking for a little more storage in your house. Hallway. No linen cabinets here. Kitchen. Let's go into the dining room here. I guess we didn't go into the sunroom here either. See the windows. Dining room. So we had a door going into the sunroom, door coming into the kitchen from into the dining room, and then into the hallway. You're usually not going to have this many doors in a newer building. Door going up the stairs. And I was going to leave this door out, but I'm guessing that most of these houses, and you can maybe help me out here, this door was shut to keep the rest of the house warm. So would have been my guess. Stairs, entryway, and again ours is all built out of brick. And let's go to the outside. And the reason why I didn't put the roof on was because it would have took a lot more work to do the roof. And of course I have the framing on that. You really don't need to see the details on that. A lot of windows. You wouldn't see this in a newer house here, I should say. I wouldn't think. I think the footage on this was about 1150, 1200 feet. Or a 2-bedroom house, but you do have a 2-bedroom, pretty good sized rooms, large living room, and you got this room here. You could probably have moved this over a little bit and made this into another bedroom. And the dining room, I don't know if that needed to be that big either. So, and as you can see here, we don't have a hallway coming in here. You're walking through the dining room, which isn't a big deal, going through a door and then coming in here. Usually we have a hallway coming off, going into the bedrooms, kind of a thing. So I will go ahead and end the video right here. Well, welcome to part 2 in our video series about how homes could have been built in 1923. And the reason why I'm going to say could have been built is because they are a variety of different methods used. And I have seen quite a few of them over the years of working in construction. Now, keep in mind, the oldest house I worked on was built around 1922, I believe. And living in Southern California, I don't get these old homes that you might get on the East Coast or even the middle of the country here in the United States. So cut me some slack here. I'm just kind of going to throw out my design here. And keep in mind that homes were built right on top of the ground back then. They were built on top of wood beams. They were built on top of, they had concrete piers located around the perimeter of the house. And they were even built on top of rocks. They would just simply roll a boulder in here and, kind of level out a hole, dig a hole down for it, set the boulder in, and they were done. So in my model, we are going to use a concrete footing that's going to be 6 inches deep and about 20 inches wide. And it's going to go around the perimeter. And of course, everything that is 6 inches deep is going to be used for the fireplace and the piers that are going to be holding up the center beam. So here we have the front porch, fireplace, and the back porch. Let's go ahead and put our brick walls in here. Our brick walls are going to be about 8 inches wide, which would provide us with 2 rows of bricks running in this direction, which every once in a while we'd run one and change it and run it perpendicular to add strength to the wall. So a good way of building a foundation like this. And of course our wall is going to be about 18 inches tall. Going to have a crawl space opening in it so that we can access underneath the house, have access to it. Our back porch. Now, on our plan, it didn't provide us with, this could have been wood framing. I chose to build it out of brick. Seemed like it'd be a little easier, more heavy duty. And when I say that, for those of you who live in the snow, even though I don't live in the snow, I would imagine if this was built out of brick, you're coming in, you're taking your boots off, stuff like that. This area is going to be wet all winter, something like that. Then the brick's probably going to work out a little better. So I'm probably building this house a little better than it would have been back in that period. But again, these are options when trying to figure out how these homes were going to be built back in the 1920s. Going to have a slot here for our beam that is going to run to support the floor joist, center of the house. And of course, the beam needs to be raised up to be even with the sill plate, as we can see here. So it's just kind of sitting in a pocket here. And you're probably wondering how all this stuff was attached, how the sill plates were attached. Well, I've actually seen them where they were just sitting right on top of the concrete foundation. Sometimes they might have drove a nail into the wood and in between the mortar. They would try to get it into the mortar in between the bricks. That'd be a little softer spot. And again, their thinking, I'm guessing, their thinking back then was just to position everything, because once you had the floor framed, it would hold everything together. The floor would be framed and the sheathing would be attached to it, providing you with a nice solid foundation that wasn't going to go anywhere unless there was an earthquake, because some of these homes actually would slide off of their foundations in the future. So keep that in mind. If you have an older home like this, you might want to check the foundation. Now, a couple of ways that the beam could have been attached to the piers would have been, they would have just sat right on top and they might have driven a nail into the side, one on each side, couple on each side, might have had a block. This was a common method. They would just simply set the block on top of the pier and then attach the framing to it. Another method, I've seen this plenty of times, it's not going to look as nice as the one that I have here, but they would have simply just threw some mortar on top of the piers. And of course, later on, as there was movement, the mortar would simply just get knocked right off. And again, just a block, not too difficult. They would, this was probably the most common one that I saw. This might have been first, this one here might have been second, but just simply having a block on top of here, and maybe you would have some nails going into the pier, trying to stabilize everything. Now let's go ahead and add our fireplace. Take a look at a little ledge that I put in here. I've seen this a lot, even though it might not have been built as nice as the one I have here. This is actually going to be used to support the floor joist instead of installing some type of a doubler and going around it. Next up, let's go ahead and put our front porch in. And again, I'm going to build it out of brick. This might not have been the case back then, but again, my building's going to be a little stronger than the one they probably built back then. Now let's go ahead and wrap this video up by pointing out the fact that they probably would have built the fireplace in sections. So they would have built the fireplace kind of as far as they could have standing in this area. Then they would have built the floor. And then they would have built a little bit more of the fireplace. And then they might have put the ceiling joist in and then worked off of that section to finish it. So they wouldn't have just built the entire fireplace from the ground up. They would have done it in sections as they were building the house. So there it is, our building foundation from 1923 as I would have built it during that time period. No building hardware. We don't have any framing anchors, anchor bolts, or even structural rebar. And who knows how good the concrete would have been back then, how it would have been mixed, where they would have got their sand from. You know, it might not have been very good sand. You might have had larger rocks in your concrete and smaller amounts of concrete to make it easier to tear out in the future, but not as structurally strong as the building foundations today. Welcome to our floor framing video for our 1923 house, how it could have been done. And when I say could have been done, I've seen plenty of homes built like this. And it seems like after I make the video, I have people that say, hey, I've never saw a house built like that. And then I have somebody else saying, oh yeah, there was a bunch of those homes built, you know, up here in this part of the country or something like that. So if this is your home, feel free to let us know. And if this is all new to you, then it's time to learn, right? So let's go ahead and take a closer look at our floor joist and our sill plates. And of course, this is just a connection that could have been used. More common would have been just to butt it up against something. Sill plates, framing for our stair head out, our little stairwell here for our porch. And the framing plates or the sill plates could have been attached in a variety of different ways. One of the ways they used to set them was by putting mortar on top of the walls and setting them on top of that, kind of like you would a brick. And I would like to say that they nailed them in. The only problem is that the homes that I've worked on, they weren't. They were just sitting on top of the walls. So I actually pulled a floor off. I had a 2-story building one time I was working on. And it was probably about 40 foot wide by about 80 foot long, something like that. And I had to remove the 2-story part of the building and actually pulled the whole floor off. You know, I had all the structural beams here and pulled the whole floor off with a big truck. And the floor just rolled right off the building and onto the ground. There was nothing holding it on. So don't be surprised if you have a building sitting on top of something with nothing at all supporting it. So enough of that story. Now I got to get back here. Okay, don't forget we're going to be setting the wall framing studs on top of these plates also, in case you're wondering why the joist was held back a little bit. And I've seen this more than once where you didn't have a structural support header. You just had the joist sitting right on top of the framing plate. So I left it like that. And of course this joist is set back a little bit to make way for the framing studs. But this one right here, we're going to need something for the doorway, the door opening. And remember that the door opening is a little wider because it has the 2 windows on each side of it. 16 inches on center, lapping over the support beams. Fireplace usually going to have about an inch gap there. Coming around there. Inch gap around the entire fireplace. And of course this is the little sill or the ledge that we're going to take a look at here that I showed you in the foundation video. This was common. I've seen this often. They just built a little ledge out of masonry and then set the support for the joists on top. I mean, it wouldn't have been uncommon. I mean, I hate to, let's go back and take a look at the top of this here. You know, you can get rid of this. There's a good chance that these joists just sat right on top of the ledge, and that this ledge wouldn't have been as clean as I had it. You know, maybe they would have had some brick they would put in there, and the carpenters might have actually had to have put more mortar in there and then set these joists on top of the bed of mortar. So how I have it looks a little cleaner. So don't be confused. This stuff might not look as nice. And of course the joists lapping over the beams, and a lot of times you wouldn't have any straps connecting the beams together here. They were just sitting on top of the piers. Zoom out. Let's go ahead and put our floor sheathing on. 1x8. And it's not running diagonal. It's not tongue and groove. Just regular 1x8. And even though I'm showing it built this way, I'm showing it built to where we're building the floor first, this might not have been how it would have been built. They might have built the walls first and then came in and built the floor joist. So it could have been done either way. So keep that in mind while you are watching the video. Of course, here is the front door. Floor coming out for the door jamb. Another side, again, we got plenty of room for our wall framing studs. The back porch, I should say. And of course, remember I built it out of brick for kind of more or less for waterproofing. You know, maybe you're on the East Coast and you don't want to get your floor wet. Maybe this would be the area where you take off all of your boots and stuff like that. Framed opening. Panning out. Fireplace, again, remember I said that they'd kind of build the fireplace in sections. You know, here you have a nice floor you can start working on. Maybe you can put a ladder on the floor. Might be a little more difficult to do that on the ground or even around some of these joists. So that is it for this video. The next one will be on the wall framing. Welcome to another one of our videos on our 1923 house framing, or should I say on how homes could have been framed in 1923. Now, you need to keep in mind that I'm not about to suggest that all homes built in 1923 were framed this way, but I am suggesting that some of them were. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing on the list is that there are no double top plates. They were usually just nailed together. Everything was just nailed together. And of course, the wall framing studs are sitting on top of the sill plate and not on top of the floor sheathing. And they were usually nailed against the floor joist with no blocks. However, there could have been blocks installed, but that probably wouldn't have been the case because blocks weren't really popular until they started setting the walls on top of the floor sheathing. Take a look at the three windows here. Double studs or double trimmers here underneath the header. Next up, let's go ahead and take a look at the inside of the header, where there's usually going to be some type of a ripped strip of lumber that will fur out the wall to where it's going to be even with the wall framing stud on the inside. And there's usually going to be a 2x6, a 2x8, or even a 2x4 on the outside. Not like construction standard framing today where we would have a 4x6 or a 4x8, for example. Here they just had a 2x6 with a furring strip on the inside. Next up, let's take a look at the inside wall where we have three equally sized windows and the same reveal on each side, two 2x4s all the way across. Next up, let's take a look at the channel here where the wall nails into the framing plate, and of course the break here where it's just nailed into the wall framing stud, and of course the backing. Probably a 1x, maybe a 1x4, 1x6. And of course that will make a little more sense once we look at the inside here, where if we didn't have this piece, that the lathing wouldn't have anything to nail to. Let's take a look at another inside channel. And of course the door headers would be framed the same as the window headers. And the inside channel here though might be framed a little different. We're going to look at two different ways. The first would be that maybe there's just a space a little bit away from the edge here, and then the next would be moving the backing back a little bit. Now sometimes the lathers would have ran the lath through a little bit and then put a backing strip on the other side, just used their lath and then nailed this corner to it. So I've seen this before where there's no corner backing. I just wanted to point that out, and throughout the video I'm going to provide you with other methods I have seen in a variety of different situations. Now let's take a look at something that probably wasn't going to happen, and that would be running the top plate through. There's a good chance the wall would have stopped right here, but maybe it didn't. Maybe they ran it through so that they could attach their backing to the top plate and to the wall framing stud and end up with a 1-inch gap around the fireplace. And of course on the other side, same situation. And again, the pop out, I really don't know why they did this. It seems like they could have just ran this wall through and then brought the fireplace over a little bit. And then of course the bedroom would have been a little larger. The walls would have been easier to frame. And of course the living room would have been what, 6 or 7 inches smaller. But maybe that, maybe the fireplace encroaching in on the living room was already making it, cramping the space. Next up, let's take a look at the front wall with the front door. And if you remember, this door is a little larger because it's going to have 2 side lights or 2 smaller windows in it. And of course our windows on each side and the front porch. Beams of course would just be connecting with no building hardware. Everything's nailed together, backing. And of course the porch beams, support beams for the roof rafters sitting on top of a post and on top of a 2x4. If you remember in the drawing, it had some type of a column that wrapped around it. So I figured I could have the 2x4 outside of the wall. The other living room windows, and of course these are framed a little differently. We have 1 stud going all the way up to the top, and then 2 trimmers on each side, and of course another way to frame a window. This would probably be another common method of framing. They would just go 16 inches on center and basically cut the window out. They just basically fill it in, run the header all the way over and the sill all the way over, along with a filler stud or a window trimmer that would produce the desired width of the window framing or the rough window opening. And I went ahead, and even though the bottom sill runs through, I went ahead and stopped the filler piece here because this is one way they could have built it. However, they could have also continued the filler piece all the way through. Corner window, again 2. You're usually going to have a full-length stud and a trimmer. However, this window could have been shoved further against the corner, either 2 inches or all the way to where the wall would have went into the door jamb. So it could have been framed, moved over 2 inches, or it could have been moved over 4 inches to where this face of the wall framing stud, face of the door trimmer, would have been even with the wall framing and the lath would have went into it. So again, another suggestion. Bathroom window, and of course the backing for the corner here. I've seen this plenty of times where they just gave the lather about a 1/2 inch, went ahead and just put a strip on the side, instead of a full-length 2x4. And of course the other windows, corner window again, inside view of the bedroom windows, another view, and of course the framing plate here is lapping over the window header and of course could be nailed into it to create a stronger connection there. Corner of the window framing, bottom, and of course the window here was framed to where the wall framing stud was kept at 16 inches on center. So 16 inches on center going this way. More than likely they would have just moved it over or installed some type of a block in between the trimmer and the wall framing stud. Of course, the window here, a top plate, the break is over the header, allowing for a stronger connection. You could nail each side of the framing plate into the header. And even though this probably wouldn't have happened, I went ahead and threw it in there because I've seen it before, where you might have a 24 or even a 26-inch span between wall framing studs. And of course, a 1x4 backing for the lath. And now let's go ahead and take a look at the inside of the room. Closet door for the bedroom here. Now I got to point this out. This is probably going to be the most common method used for framing a channel, and that would be putting two 2x4s, centering them on the edge. So the center of the 2x4 would be right here, and that'll become a little clearer when we go ahead and take a look at the other side. So if we had a 2x4, we would have 1 inch over here and 1 inch over here, and they would just simply nail this framing stud into this. They would nail it in, and that would create a nice tight connection there. So real common method. Something else you might have seen would have been where they just took blocks. They might have had 3 or 4 blocks that were scrap pieces of wood, and they just nailed them to create a corner for backing. And again, it might have just been whatever in the heck they had. It was just something to nail the lath to. So the inside of the closet here, the backing, another way of putting the backing in, a full 1x6. And you might not have had, keep in mind, if you had 1x8 for the flooring, for the floor sheathing, you might not have had 1x6, but you would have been able to cut it down. But if you're using a handsaw, you're probably not going to be ripping this board down. You're just going to be nailing a 1x8 there. And hopefully that makes sense. And of course, here's the door to the bathroom and then into the hallway. Now let's take a look at the closet framing. Now I didn't put any backing here. I've came across jobs before where the lath was just nailed. It kind of cantilevered over or floated over to the edge here. Now this gap is a little too big, but you know, if you had a gap, just a 1 inch gap here, or maybe a 2 inch gap, they would just nail it to the framing here and then just let it hang over, and that would be enough for the plasterer. Front of the closet, backing, door into the bedroom. Bedroom wall, one of the few walls in the house that just has regular framing there without an opening in it. The dining room and the window. Coming into the kitchen. Remember, this is the stairwell up to the attic, and of course the entry. At least it's listed as an entry. Windows, full-length header, another full-length header. So a lot of windows in this small room. Maybe a pantry closet here. Leaving the house, and of course here we have a low wall with the headroom there is going to be a little lower for the stairwell. And of course these are the walls for the stairs, and I have it drawn. They're all cut to fit, and more on that when we actually build the stairs. But here you can see where there is a gap for the 1x12 or 1x10 stair stringer that we're going to use. And again, more on that when I get to that video. This will be the side door or the back door, and a couple of steps going up to the house or up into the entryway. Dining room, bottom of the window framing. Another view again of the wall framing studs connecting to the floor joist. Backing here, different sizes. The dining room window. And here's something I wanted to show you. It wasn't uncommon if they had a break and they had the wall framing studs, they would just simply put a block underneath it and nail to it. This was another common form of attaching the window framing together. In this video, I will be talking about the stairway that we built in our 1923 home building project. And for those of you who are not familiar with it, I will put a link to a playlist that will have all of the videos attached to it for this particular home. And even some of the videos, if I make in the future, about different modifications to the home will also be included in that video also. So here we have a stairway that fits in a tight space. It has 9-inch treads, 8-inch risers, and I squeezed this baby in here. I made everything I could work about it. And for those of you wondering why I didn't add a couple more steps at the top, or maybe throw a few more steps into the landing, or even make the stair steps a little smaller, well then hopefully by the time you're done watching the video it will make sense. So here we have 3 steps going down to a landing with a diagonal step, and then going down the rest of the way. 1x10 or 1x12 stringers with 1x treads and no risers. And remember, all of this lumber is thicker. This is actually a 2-inch by 6-inch, not an 1.5 by 5.5. And the same thing with the stringers. This is a 1-inch by 12-inch. This is a 1-inch by 9-inch, obviously, since it's a 9-inch step, even though this could have been a little wider, and they might have made them a little wider also during that period of construction. The closet, this would have had some type of lath and plaster over it, and I doubt if it would have been open. I've seen plenty of stairways like this built where the risers aren't closed, and it has some type of a ceiling underneath it with a bunch of trash down here that you can't get out sometimes, or areas that are hard to clean. The landing, I just kind of assembled this how I thought it would have been assembled back in that time. And here we have some 1x sheathing sitting on top of a wall with some joist and sheathing sitting on top to make our next step, or our angled step. And of course the 1x spans from here to here. And this wouldn't have been tongue and groove either. This would have just been square edge sheathing. But I did something different and cut a notch or a dado, kind of a slot in here, so that the sheathing could sit in the notch and have something to support it at the same time, creating some type of a header here for this opening. And this header is also notched into the 2x wall framing stud, something that probably wouldn't be approved today, but back then you could probably do what you wanted because there were no building inspectors. And of course the stringers are stopping here, kind of protruding into this area a little bit to make the stairs work out a little bit better. As a space-saving feature for the stairway, you could have moved the stairway back and pushed it into the kitchen a little bit, or furred out this wall if you wanted it to be flat, but I'm guessing they would have simply plastered over this or added some type of wood, maybe some 1x here to block this area off, and then simply just painted the bottom of this, and then painted the wood, and then painted this, and then lath and plastered the rest of this. And another thing I need to point out is that I have this stopping here. However, the stringer could have extended past here to support the floor sheathing if you needed it to, and of course this one here could have extended past, and you could have just had the ceiling come up here and then kind of die into here and then over, without really creating a headroom problem, because you're kind of going to walk in the center of this area, come in the door in the center, and then come up the stairs this way on the lower floor, and I think you would still have enough headroom there. And then just kind of shaped the studs here to provide us with a little more headroom going up the stairs that are below this. The stringers space the wall framing. Let's go ahead and take a look at the door opening. And I'm guessing that the stringers would have butted up against the wall and not up against the door jamb or the door jamb trim if you were to finish the door trim out on the inside of this. Take a look at the other side. Same thing. Stringer coming down tight up against the framing stud, and of course the step back a little further. However, we could have brought this into the door jamb. If the door was going to stop about here, we could have brought this step in a little bit further if we needed a little extra room. But sometimes when you start doing stuff like that, you bring the tread into the door jamb and it doesn't look very aesthetically pleasing. So you got to keep that in mind when you are searching for space on stairs that don't have enough room. Next step, let's go ahead and remove some of the walls to give you an idea of what the stairway would look like, or a better idea. Taking a section out, sometimes we can't see everything. Just kind of work our way around. Voila. Let's go ahead and throw the walls back in there. We don't have the floor joist in here. You can kind of see how some of it would work out. And now let's go ahead and put the floor joist in there. And then add the sheathing. Coming around here. Come down the stairs. Another view of it there. 1 by stringers, 1 by treads. And of course the wall sitting on top of the sheathing. And that brings us to the end of this video. In this video we will be going over the ceiling joist and the ceiling framing for the 1923 home. So let's go ahead and install the ceiling joist, and these are basically going to be ceiling joist along with the attic floor joist, and they are going to be 2 by 6. Remember, the wood we are working with is full size lumber, 2 inches by 6 inches, not nominal like you usually get at the lumber yards today, and they are spaced 24 inches on center. Around the fireplace we're using 1 by for our ceiling backing, and of course this would be lath, not drywall, back in 1923. And of course we will have a 1-inch space between the fireplace and the wood framing. Another piece of backing here. The doubler here is used to support the doubler that is holding up the ceiling joist in front of the fireplace. More backing, our bathroom. We got backing in the closets. 1 by seemed to be a common backing for homes built back then, but don't be surprised to find a 2 by. And of course the 1 by would have been used to save a few dollars. Kitchen area and the stairway. The stairway, I am going to put a link here to the stairway video I made on another one of my channels if you want to check that one out. And it wasn't uncommon to have the ceiling joist connect together instead of lapping them with some type of a 1 by. And of course the 1 by might not have been used and the ceiling joist would have just sat and broke halfway on top of the top plate, and who knows what other methods they might have used back then. The stairway going down, and if you noticed I didn't put any blocks in between the ceiling joist here, and of course that would have been something that you would have had to have done today, but I don't think that would have been that big of a deal back then, so I didn't put them in there. And let's go ahead and install our 1 by 8 floor sheathing, and it would have been installed horizontally instead of diagonally. Later on they started installing floor sheathing diagonally. I'm not 100% sure they did that back in 1923, but feel free, if anybody knows that they did, feel free to share that with us in the comment area. And of course we had to change the direction of the sheathing here since the direction of the joist changed. Next up, let's take a look at a section of the roof rafters. Here we have an 8 and 12, which of course would give us plenty of room in the attic. The gable wall framing with a window, and again I'm just kind of winging it here because I couldn't see the other side of the house and figured that since there was a window on the other side that there might be a window on this side here. 16 inches on center wall framing studs. 2 by 6 rafters, and this could have been 2 by 4, by the way. I made them 2 by 6, which definitely could have been used back then by home builders. And if you remember in the original drawing of the 1923 house, the chimney looked like it was on this side of the ridge, which looks like this is where it worked out to be, scaling everything out with the model. And at the end of both sides of the ridge here, we have a couple of small hips coming off to create a nice decorative shape for the end of the gable wall. And I've seen a lot of homes where something like this seemed to be extremely popular during this period. And of course the jack rafters coming down to the valley. And now let's swing around to the other side of the building where we can see where we have the same wall. And I would imagine these windows were for light more than anything, and that the attic was used for living space too. And I'm sure there are plenty of homes today that were built like this where the attic has been converted to living space. View of the window header and the framing. Next up, let's put the support walls for the rafters in. You can see it here in case you were wondering why we stopped the floor sheathing where we stopped it. And I simply used 1-bys to connect the wall framing studs to the rafters. Again, everything is 24 inches on center, and it would have been nice to have the rafters next to the ceiling joist so that the support stud would be sitting on top of something instead of in the middle of the floor sheathing, if it even had floor sheathing underneath it. I mean, if it was me, I would have installed the floor sheathing first and then built the roof so that I would have had something to stand on while building the roof. But they could have used scaffold, built the roof, and then came back and installed the floor sheathing later. And if that's the case, then they wouldn't have had any floor sheathing underneath the 2-by support, which could have reduced the strength for any of the support studs if they located on top of the plate instead of directly over the ceiling joist. Our 1-window floor sheathing, the attic area, and what looks like it was meant to be used as some type of living or storage space, obviously. Next up, let's go ahead and take a look at the roof sheathing. And I just simply matched the floor sheathing. I used 1x8, spaced it so that cedar shingles could be installed. And the breaks are staggered. And your house might not look like this because more than likely they would have took this piece and then cut this piece out of it and then used that piece to start over here and then put a full piece and then work their way up throughout the project. However, it was definitely easier for me to do it this way, and that is the way it gets done. And of course, the decorative hips here into the roof, gable roof, and obviously the sheathing isn't lining up with the other pieces, no problem. Fireplace, chimney, sheathing in the front, and of course this wall to match the other wall on the opposite side. View from above with a valley on each side. And now let's go ahead and take a look at our porch. Zoom in there. And it wouldn't have been uncommon to just have the fill rafters sitting on top of the 1x6 and having the 1x6 support the ridge, because there wouldn't have been a lot of weight on something like this. And of course we have our collar ties here, sheathing, nice looking porch. Take a look at our overhang here. We have overhang for the crown molding, even though I didn't install the crown molding because that would have took me too long. However, I am going to provide you with some crown molding, or at least a detail here that might have been acceptable. Something like this, and it would have worked its way all the way around the roof. And that is it for this video. I don't know if this is the end of the series. If I make more videos, I will throw them into the playlist created for this, and they will also be located on the website for anything concerned with the 1923 house framing project, whether it's remodeling or even putting a room addition onto it in the future.